Wise Child by Monica Furlong, Chapter 17, The Summoning Stone. Once again Juniper and I were gathering berries and nuts, peat and hay to prepare ourselves for the winter. "It will be a hard one this year," Juniper warned. One bright September day she took me on a long journey high into the mountains. We walked for miles, sometimes climbing up steep parts on our hands and knees, stooping often to get our breath back and enjoy the view. We passed through a tiny green corrie that reminded me of Ossian and his mother, and exclaimed at the pleasure of seeing the deer there. They looked back at us, still unafraid, curious. "You know, that time at Beltane, I thought they were going to kill me," I said. "Being ready for death, that is something one has to learn. Knowing that it doesn't matter, that is what makes it possible to live." Finally we arrived, panting and tired, dripping with sweat, at a small wood of oak and hazel, in a fold of the mountains, protected there from bitter winter winds. It was very quiet in the wood, and the bright light of the sky filtered through the leaves and made patterns on the forest floor. We moved slowly, silently, as if the quiet of the place put a finger on our lips. We walked on for perhaps half a mile, then emerged into a small clearing. Juniper hesitated a moment there, as if uncertain of her bearings. The wood was very dense. Then, with a swift movement, she went over to a rock, emerging from the ground, and slipped behind it. I could scarcely believe my eyes. 1 minute she was there, and the next gone. "Round here," she called, and I too slipped around the rock and found myself in a little alley cut between briars and brambles. We followed this thorny path for a while, until it led us around to the right, and suddenly we were in another, much more private clearing. I heard it before I saw it. In the middle a small spring bubbled up beside a stone. On the stone stood a silver cup. It was placed exactly in the middle of a rune that had been carved there. Juniper and I stood one on each side of the spring. She filled the cup and passed it to me to drink, and when I finished it, I did the same for her. When we finished this tiny ceremony, we made our way back home again. "Why did we do that?" I asked curiously. Juniper made no reply. I am not sure why, but the rune put me in mind of the stone with the fire in it that I had hidden under my bed at home after meeting with Maeve and Aunt Morags. I had not looked at it for months, but that night I took it out when I was in bed and Juniper was busy downstairs. The fire within it looked different at different times. This time it looked yellowy, though when you moved it gave sudden stabs of orange. It felt cold against my cheek. I thought of Maeve of the red Judas hair, and unexpectedly I longed for her. One day when I was bigger I would go back and see her, but now I must live with Juniper and learn Latin. "I'm going away for a week soon," said Juniper. "Good. I love going on long journeys. By myself." "Where are you going?" "To visit a Doran in one of the Northern Isles." "Why can't I come then?" "Because we shall want to sit and talk for hours, and you would be very bored. You know how you get." I pouted. I hated it when Juniper wasn't there, and I didn't like her enjoying herself without me. Also, a week was a very long time. "See," she said, guessing my fears. "I am going to lend you this while I am away. It is a talisman with a special rune for protection and comfort written upon it." It was a flat piece of silver. You could see the marks where the hammer had shaped it. There were 2 holes in the top, where a piece of leather went through it, so that you could hang it up if you wanted. "It's pretty," I said, as its gleaming surface caught the light. "Better than pretty," Juniper said. She was especially nice to me in the days before she went, retelling my favourite stories, singing my favourite songs, cooking my favourite meals. "You spoil me," I told her solemnly. "Do you think I should stop?" she asked, and she winked at me. "I am an impossible child. Everyone used to say so." "Used to say so? Now I think you're rather nice." I glowed with pleasure. That night, as on the other nights before it, I took out the hidden stone. It fascinated me that however often I looked at it, it was always different. Sometimes I even had the fancy that it was saying something to me, that if I listened harder I would know what it said. Sometimes I thought it was wrong of me not to tell Juniper about it, but then I would think, it's only an old stone, why would she mind? But then, if she wouldn't mind, why did I think it was better to hide it from her? It was quite puzzling. The day of Juniper's departure came. She took Tilly with her and two big panniers. I was angry with her for going, and kissed her aloofly and refused to show much interest in her journey, just to punish her. Before she had clattered out of the yard on Tilly's back, I had gone in and shut the door. I did not want her to see the tears I had already begun to shed, tears that I wept under the bearskin. She did not love me. Nobody who loved her little girl went away and left her. Presently my tears ceased. I wiped my face, dried my eyes, went downstairs, and ate all of the meal Juniper had thoughtfully prepared for my lunch, though we had only just eaten breakfast. Then I took out my stone. It had never looked so beautiful. There were deep indigo, purple, and violet colours glinting in it. I raised it to my cheek. It seemed to be easier to hear what it said. I thought I caught the words me, and home, and road. There was something rhythmical in its tiny voice, as if it was reciting a poem. I needed to know what the poem was. It was tantalizing to so nearly get the words of the little poem. I took the stone out onto the steps where Juniper and I had so often sat together. Wise child, to me, over hill and sea, footsteps take road home. I put the stone down and wandered restlessly around the house and garden. I popped some fuchsia buds and some snapdragons. I crushed a leaf of lemon balm in my hand and smelled it. I went into the dairy and took a spoonful of delicious yellow cream and swallowed it. At this time of day I was usually reading and writing. Around Juniper there was never a lot of time for daydreaming and meandering, but since Juniper was not here I saw no reason not to give myself a holiday. However, as I soon discovered, it did make the time go awfully slowly. A bit later I went back to the stone and picked it up again. It was now warm from lying in the sunlight, and as if this had infused it with energy, its tiny voice was louder and clearer than before. Wise child, will you come to me, over land and hill and sea? No longer let your footsteps roam. Take the road that leads you home. I am not sure that I ever heard separate words of it, just like that, but I had heard enough of it to get the sense of the whole. I heard something else too, that the voice was Maeve's. I felt at once excited, pleased, and very afraid. The beautiful Maeve did love me, and want me after all. She had missed me when I had gone. She must be at her great house on the mainland, over the sea, the poem said, where I should lead a life of joy and luxury, never to have to muck out the cow stall, churn butter, chop herbs, or learn long poems by heart. Maeve might not be very easy to live with, but she would find me a handsome husband, rich and famous too, and I would live happily ever after. Somehow I had managed to forget all about the horror of the wax doll, but I did at least think of Juniper. Juniper who did not think in terms of luxury and handsome husbands, but who lived as if everything in life, some evil-smelling ointment she was making, an old man with dropsy, a bit of Latin poetry, the taste of the butter, the colour of the mead, the feel of the wind or rain or sun or tempest, the sound of thunder or the stab of lightning was joyful and a wonderful treat. A source of amusement, of pleasure, of fascination. Juniper had a secret, though, not the sort you could easily tell, and I wanted to be someone who shared that secret. I wanted to learn, too, to lose myself in the pleasure of books, of stories and thoughts, to learn more about healing people, to know about astronomy and geometry, about people who had lived in history, to be able to talk in foreign tongues, to sing and play the harp. I also liked the way Juniper kissed me and comforted me, listened to me, understood what I was trying to say to her, even when I got the words all wrong. Never made me ashamed if she could help it. She had taken me in when, because of Maeve's neglect, I was homeless. She had fed me and clothed me, taught me and sung to me. How could I abandon her? When I went to bed that night, I put the stone on the floor beside my bed and went to sleep, feeling quite peaceful. Even if I had decided to join Maeve, there was no way in the world I could get to the mainland. I had no money, no boat, no horse, no map. But I woke an hour or two later with the moon streaming in at the window. I did not touch the stone, but it seemed to me that I could now hear it reciting its little rhyme quite clearly. Wise child, will you come to me? Over land and hill. I was terribly afraid. On an impulse, I jumped out of bed, ran across the room to Juniper's bed, and hid myself under its covers. I pulled them over my head and could no longer hear the mocking little voice. Presently, when I pushed the blankets off my face, it had stopped. The next day, I decided that routine was the best cure for terror and the supernatural. I got up early, made porridge, fed Daisy and the chickens, turned some drying plants, swept the living room, did some reading, even learned some more English words. In the late afternoon, I went for a walk and came back with some honeysuckle, which I put in a pitcher on the table. I prepared supper. All day I had not touched the stone, nor gone near it. But after supper I knew that I could not postpone it any longer. As I picked it up from the floor, it was caught in the rays of the westering sun, and for a moment it was coloured bright vermilion. I held it to my cheek as before, but to my surprise, yes, and dismay, the voice had sunk down again, and I could not distinguish the words any longer. Even now that I knew what they were, I carried the stone downstairs with me and tried it several times over the next hour, but it was no good. I could not hear it. Had I displeased it in some way? The next morning I tried it again, but it was still a faint burble of a voice. Remembering what had happened 2 days before, I left it outside on the steps in the sunshine for half an hour and tried again. To my joy, the words were now much clearer, but to my astonishment they had changed. Wise child, raven-headed girl, best of daughters, Finbar's pearl, ford the river, cross the sea, come, my dear one, unto me. Once again I felt filled with intolerable longing for Maeve. I'm coming, I told the stone, only to remember, as I said it, that there was no way I could get to the mainland, nor to Maeve's house. I wept this time with the bitter disappointment of not being able to obey the stone. I began to talk to it as if it were a person. I can't go to Maeve, I told it. I wrung my hands. That day the chores were perfunctorily performed, and I did not attempt to study. I noticed that once again the voice of the stone had subsided to a quiet murmur that I could not hear, and I wondered if it would again change with the rhythm. The next morning I again put the stone in the sunlight, and when I heard its voice this time it was stronger and clearer. Wise child, I shall come to thee, over land and hill and sea. Briefly shall my footsteps roam, to take the road that leads you home. I had the strangest feeling that this was what the stone had been saying all along, but somehow I had misheard it before. As I made out the words, I cried aloud, Mother! Mother! The voice of the stone grew quiet again. In the evening, as I had come to expect, but I was anything but quiet. I felt feverish, unable to sit still or concentrate on anything. I was like someone tormented by an illness for whom the time passes as slowly as a snail. I lived now for the stone. I awaited its daily proclamation as inevitably as I waited for the sun itself. The next day the rhyme had changed again. I shall make my way to thee, ford the river, cross the sea. The curling wave shall bear you home, never ever thence to roam. And we will pause there.